Dragon Bond, Chapter 21. Since Selena had taken the initiative, running straight in and trying to attack the female face to face, Zala followed the wall in an attempt to flank the big dragon. Though she moved swiftly, wanting to act as a diversion Selena would likely need, she also scoured the chamber for other exits. If these were the king's chambers, might it not be in here somewhere too? There were two other passageways, but she couldn't tell if they led to smaller chambers or back out into the tunnel system. As much as she wanted to check and see, the female dragon already had Selena on the defensive. One wing swept toward the floor, almost knocking her off her feet. Zala raced in and drove her blade between the scales on the dragon's muscled haunch. The point bit into flesh, gray streaks of light writhing and surging like ocean waves on the flat of the sword. The dragon leaped to the side, and her tail whipped toward Zala like a viper. Resisting the urge to skitter back, she ducked the sinuous appendage and darted in closer, attacking that thigh again. This time she slashed, laying open scale to reveal blood and muscle. Though that must have hurt, the dragon wasn't distracted. Her jaws snapped together, and Selena squawked. With the wings battering the air, Zala couldn't see her lieutenant and didn't know whether she had been hit or only startled. The tail zipped toward her again, snapping at her like a whip. Ducking, Zala ran around the dragon's back end and to the other side. She turned and slashed at that thigh, too, while debating if she could reach a more vulnerable target. Those wings stirred up a storm of air from the room and made advancing a difficult proposition. The dragon was so large that Zala could not scramble up and find a way onto her back, not unless she could jump onto it from a higher position. She eyed the alcoves in the wall that held the nests, wondering if that slight elevation might be enough. Before she had taken a step toward them, movement at the back of the chamber caught her eye. A lurch of anxiety went through her gut as a second dragon thundered into view. The big male had all of Talon's size and musculature, though some of the scales around its snout had gone white, and old scars marked its chest, as if something with huge claws had once grabbed onto him while clenching a fist. With fury burning in the yellow eyes, the male raced straight for Zala. Was this the king? The dragon she had come for? She crouched near the female's thighs, skittering from side to side to keep from being trampled. Her pride wanted her to run forward and meet the king for one-on-one combat, but she was reluctant to leave Selena to deal with his ally alone. Also, staying close to the first dragon would make it harder for the newcomer to attack without striking his kin. Zala stabbed the female's thigh again, then spun in a circle, using her momentum to swing the sword toward the joint on that back leg. Her blade cut in, sinking deep. The female screeched, finally whirling to face Zala. Her tail slapped the new dragon in the head. Against her instincts, Zala sprinted in close. The female's bloody maw opened wide as if to swallow her. Seeing that blood made Zala falter. It could only belong to Selena. Pushing aside her fear, she dove below that approaching head and skidded underneath the dragon's belly. Her foe spun around, snapping at Zala. Zala jumped to her feet, using her upward momentum to help thrust her blade into the vulnerable belly. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw both the male and the female's heads biting for her, but she finished her slash, laying open the belly as if she were gutting a fish. Then she dove to the ground again, trying to roll between the female's legs to escape. Something clipped her shoulder. Fangs. Pain exploded as they cut in, but her momentum carried her away. The male would have to stick his head through the female's legs and out to the other side to catch her. "Got her," came Selena's cry from somewhere nearby. Hearing her voice filled Zala with relief, but she knew they were not safe, not even close. Jaws snapped right behind her. She glimpsed those nests and thought she could make a stand inside of one with her back to the wall. She raced towards them, but something, a tail, slammed into her back. It felt like a tree falling on her. The blow hurled her across the chamber. Even though she tried to roll to protect herself from a hard landing, she slammed into the wall. Every bone in her body groaned, and she bit her tongue as her teeth snapped together. Though dazed, she blinked and tried to find her feet. The dragons had to be right behind her. "You dare?" the male dragon's voice cried in her head. "Come into our chambers and attack us?" The words were more than communication. They were an attack. power reverberated through Zala's body, stealing her strength. She clawed her way up to the wall, trying to stand, though her knees couldn't firm up and her legs wouldn't hold her weight. She managed to lift her sword, placing it between her and the male dragon that stomped over to her and stared into her soul. You will die, and all those with you will die. Zala's only satisfaction was that the female dragon lay behind him unmoving, but Selena seemed to be pinned under the body. Blood dripped down her face and saturated her shirt. Their eyes met across the chamber. Selena's full of distress. She wouldn't be able to help Zala. Zala heaved with her body and her mind, trying to throw off the malaise, the power that was smothering her like a wet blanket. The male's fang-filled snout opened and hot breath washed over her. Zala kept her blade up, hoping vainly that the creature might impale itself. A boom sounded somewhere nearby, and the dragon's attack faltered. Tandoor? Another boom followed after the first, this one farther away, yet more muted. Yet the power of the explosion rippled through the tunnels, and soon rocks crashed down. A snap came from the ceiling above them. The male dragon spun toward the exit, and the magic that had been snuffing out Zala's strength disappeared. She ran away from the wall, straight toward Selena. Her shoulder burned with agony where the fangs had cut into her, and she couldn't feel the fingers on her left hand. She grabbed Selena with her good hand. Her lieutenant was buried to the waist under a dead dragon. "Look out!" Selena barked. The male had turned back toward them. To finish them off? Dust flooded the tunnel behind them, and he hesitated. Then rocks started falling inside the chamber. A boulder larger than the dragon's head slammed into his shoulder and bounced off. Even though the blow did nothing except make him grunt and step to the side, it seemed to alarm him. He fled, not toward the dust-filled tunnel and the screeches of his own kind that sounded in the distance, but toward the rear of the chamber. He disappeared through a passageway as more rocks plummeted down all around Zala. "Leave me," Selena gasped. Ignoring her, Zala kept pulling. She shook her left arm, trying to force circulation into the fingers. When she flexed them, they obeyed, but clumsily. It probably wouldn't even matter if she was pulling with both hands. Growling, Zala released Selena and raised her sword. With all of her strength, she slashed into the dragon's side, trying to cut through the body to somehow make it so she could extricate her lieutenant. As rocks slammed down all around her, she made a gory mess, but she managed to split the dragon open enough to lessen the weight on Selena. Finally, with her helping, Zala dragged her out. "Can you stand?" she asked, gasping for air after the exertion. Another explosion went off, under the floor somewhere. The men must have found that level underneath this one. She hoped that the rocks were burying all of those dragons in the audience chamber. Boulders slammed down into the hallway, and her hope turned to worry. Would she and Selena find a way out of this? More dust flowed out of that passage, and she was sure it would now be impassable. There had better be another way out of these chambers. Yes. No. I don't know. Selena clawed herself to her feet, using her sword like a cane. Zala wrapped her left arm around her lieutenant's waist, gasping at the pain in her shoulder, but she couldn't risk carrying her sword offhand, not when the big male dragon might yet be waiting up there. They staggered to the back of the chamber, stumbling when another explosion rocked the floor. Zala tried to keep from coughing as dust coated her throat, but she could not. She only hoped the dragons were too busy trying to stay alive to notice. Tandoor was outdoing himself. When they reached the back of the chamber and peered through the passageway the king had escaped through, there was no sign of the dragon. A rubble-filled tunnel opened up, disappearing into darkness. "Is that a way out?" Selena asked between coughs. "I have no idea." Zala's memories were empty on the matter. I guess Talon didn't get invited to the king's personal chambers that often. She hustled forward as quickly as they could manage. If she and Selena found a way back to their men, they might be able to escape the mountain alive, something she hadn't expected. Before they rounded the bend, she gave a long look back, to the front of the chamber, to the tunnel where she had last seen Talon. Was there any way he could have survived? He had been involved in a battle of his own when the ceiling had come down. Even if the rubble didn't kill him, wouldn't his kind simply finish the job? Her throat tightened from more than the dust, and she and Selena limped off into the darkness. The king might have escaped, but at least her people had managed to do what she'd hoped, to strike a mighty blow against the dragons and destroy their headquarters. Zala couldn't have done that without Talon's help, and she would forever be grateful to him.